Ladies and gentlemen, if I can ask you all please to take your seats, and we'll resume formalities shortly. Please take your seats. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. When Peter Jackson arrived at the Melbourne Footy Club as interim CEO in 2013, there's no getting away from it. The Demons were a basket case, both on and off the field. Now, Peter initially agreed, and I actually remember hearing him speak. He actually agreed to stay for 6 months. Peter ended up staying there for almost 6 years. In many ways, he revolutionised the club. He hired Paul Roos as the coach and supported him during some pretty tough times early on. He then helped the smooth transition to Simon Goodwin. He revamped the staff, he revamped the finances, but most importantly, he gave we long-suffering Demon supporters some hope. And of course, last year was the most successful on-field year at the club for 18 years, with the Demons making the preliminary final. Peter then left, and look at us now. So, Peter, you're going to have to don the boots. We want you out there on Queen's birthday. Before the Demons, of course, he had high priority roles at the Essendon Football Club, including chief executive from 1996 to 2009, ironically breaking the Demons' heart with their premiership in the year 2000. Peter has also acted as the head of AFL Victoria. So who better, ladies and gentlemen, to propose the toast to football? Peter Jackson.
Thank you very much, Nick, and thanks for that welcome, everybody. It is a real honour to be here and propose a toast to footy. It's a real, in doing so, to honour Norm Smith as well. And I'm not going to talk much about the Melbourne Football Club per se tonight, but to get involved with the Melbourne Football Club, the reason I made that decision way back in 2013. I got a phone call from Andrew Dimitri. I was standing in the shower. I answered the phone. That's true, and he asked me to get involved with the Melbourne Football Club, and he gave me 4 hours to think about it. So I got dressed, and I thought, why would I want to do that? And I think it's easy, really. Melbourne Football Club is the third oldest sporting club in the world, for having been founded in 1858, which really puts the whole thing into perspective. It evolved out of the biggest, largest, the greatest sporting club in the world, in the Melbourne Cricket Club. It's the only football club that really calls itself Melbourne. There's some other sports with clubs here that call themselves Melbourne, but they don't matter in this town. And the AFL simply could not have a Melbourne Football Club which is not strong, not sustainable, not competitive, a club that wrote the rules and goes way back to 1858. So the decision was really a simple one in the end of the day, and that was my motivation. Look, I want to join in acknowledging the traditional owners of the land we're gathered on tonight as well, the Wurundjeri people, and pay my respects to their elders, past, present and future. I've loved Australian football as long as I can remember, from being an 8-year-old boy going to Thebarton Oval in Adelaide with my father, hoping, but not expecting, that West Torrens, or the Eagles as they were known, could win today. Invariably they didn't. And I owe so much to AFL football. Along with a woman sitting up with me on table 11, my wife Christine, AFL football has to a large extent made me what I am today. It has taught me more than any other management position I ever had about people, leadership, culture, and it developed in me the skills and confidence to perform in the public arena. And so for that I am very grateful for football. I distinguish tonight at times between the Australian rules football and the AFL football. Of course it's the same game, but so many people so very emotionally invested in community football see AFL football as that national elite competition branded by the AFL, and they see their game as Australian rules football. And as Nick just said, most of my career in football was in AFL football. But I'm also one of the few, if not the only one, as far as I can work out, senior administrator who has worked at the most senior level at both AFL clubs and in community football, the latter being as Executive Chairman of AFL Victoria between the times at Essendon and Melbourne. For those of you who don't know, at that time AFL Victoria was responsible for all the football in Victoria below the national competition. That is the VFL, the TAC under-18 competition, community football, both metro and country, talent pathways into the draft, junior football, participation, schools football, the AMOs, the whole lot. Almost 2 years of that role I spent travelling and meeting with both metro and country community football stakeholders to understand their challenges in order to get them to support a far-reaching and radical change in the governance of football in Victoria, so that additional resources and investment could be put into the game at the local level where it mattered. Those resources were invested, and I hope the AFL has continued on with them. My view is that the AFL football and community football are interdependent, and neither can survive alone without the other. If anyone needs any convincing of the significance of community football and what the game means to so many people, consider this. In 2018, just under 7.9 million people attended AFL and AFLW games. But about 8.25 million people around the country watched state league and community matches. That is, metro leagues, country leagues, junior leagues, school football, AMOs, as I said. Just think about that for a moment. For the AFL, it means that in season 2018, 22 rounds, or 198 crowds, at home and away games with an average size of about 35,000, plus finals, plus AFLW. For community football, it probably means about 20 weekends, including finals, something like 17,000 crowds around the country of average size of, say, 500 people. And of course, most of those crowds watch more than one game in a day. I'm told there's about 3,500 games of football around the country in a weekend. 17,000 crowds of people leaning on the fence, leaning on their elbows, driving cars up to the boundary line, blowing their horns at goals, queuing at the sausage and beer marquees. This game of ours really is about local communities, and we should never forget that. And it is the army of volunteers of those community clubs and leagues around the country who, through their own efforts, keep the game running at grassroots level. The success of AFL football at the elite level is critical to the game's overall success. We need a strong, vibrant national competition at the elite level for the game to survive and thrive at the community level. But the elite competition is, and will ever be, dependent on community football. Sam Mitchell is a superstar of the AFL, but Sam didn't start his career and his journey at the AFL level. The thousands of crowds, volunteers and community clubs and leagues that keep community football sustainable and help develop the Sam Mitchells of the world are critical to the AFL football's success, and I'll talk a bit more about that later. Thinking about what I would say tonight gave me cause to reflect on my personal journey into the AFL football and how I got there. I think we all have those moments in our lives that have a profound impact on us and then determine or influence decisions we make and paths we choose to follow in our future lives. On reflection, football provided me those moments and led me to make the decision I did when the opportunity presented itself. I was a West Torrens supporter in the Sandful. Like most of us, I had no choice. But mostly, it was a miserable experience. The last of only a handful of club premierships was in 1953, the year I was born. None after that. They merged with Woodville later on when I wasn't there and had some success. But that sort of performance by any club has always led to member frustration, upheaval, coaches being sacked, and eventually crisis meetings. Not that that would be happening at the moment. I clearly remember attending one such crisis meeting with my father at Theberton Town Hall around 1961-62. I don't know why he took me, I was 8 or 9 years old. I don't remember the agenda of the meeting or what the outcome was, but I do absolutely clearly remember a very frustrated old stalwart of the club say to my father in front of me as he threw his hands up in disgust, "A football club is only as good as its administration." That comment has stayed with me forever. In fact, it became my personal mantra for my whole time in the AFL. It is absolutely true. A club cannot succeed without a good administration. Sure, the players rightly are the heroes of the club, and generations of players build the brand and the supporter base of the club, and they need to be coached well. But without a good administration, you won't entice good people to your club and you won't have success. And as an administrator, in whatever capacity that may be, it should never be about you. The heroes are the players and the team and the clubs. The role of the administrator is to always put the long-term well-being of the club or the game first, and not your own ego. To have the courage to pursue that without fear or favour. And I have to say, when you do, you may not make a lot of friends with some of the people who tend to gather around AFL clubs. So back to my journey into football. One year, 1963, it looked like the misery at West Torrens was about to end. The club had decided to chase and got the great Dick Reynolds as coach after Essendon sacked him. I met Dick as a 10-year-old boy at my uncle's place, I clearly remember being in awe of him and was so excited that a guy from the great Essendon Football Club would come to coach my club in Adelaide. Dick Reynolds joined Bob Shearman, who had come over from Essendon in 1961. Bob would become captain of South Australian state side. These two guys together instilled hope and excitement in Eagles supporters to the effect that at last we thought we could be good. And we thought 1963 was our year. We finished minor premiers. We all thought the premiership beckoned. But alas, we went out in straight sets. To add insult to injury, our hero Bob Shearman stood out of football in 1965 to join Sturt. In South Australian terms, that was akin to Ron Barassi leaving Melbourne to go to Carlton. I met Bob many years later at Essendon, and I fronted him and said, "Bob, you broke my heart when I was a kid." He said the culture and chance of success at Sturt was much better than West Torrens. He went to Sturt. Sturt won 5 premierships in a row. The club is only as good as its administration. In 1968, I watched a live telecast of the grand final, Essendon versus Carlton, which Carlton won by 3 points. The final siren so clear in my mind, a boundary line stoppage on the wing, and that real hard ruckman, Don McKenzie, falling to his knees in despair. That was when I first learnt to hate Carlton. I still do. They proved to be a nemesis at both Essendon and Melbourne since. Both of those clubs lost in my time at both those clubs at Carlton in games they should not have lost. The most notable, of course, was the 99 preliminary final at Essendon. I'm really trying to feel sorry for Carlton at the moment. But I can't. We had a chance again under John Burt, who came from Essendon as well and was coach for 3 years in 1968 to 70. Same thing, the club reached the finals, high up, but went out in straight sets. So that miserable experience at West Torrens had continued, but by now I had an emotional connection to the Essendon Football Club. My boyhood heroes were Essendon names. I moved to Melbourne in 1974 to start my business career. I just had to get to the VFL Grand Final in my first year. It was Richmond versus North Melbourne. Of course, I didn't have a ticket, so I got to the ground at 7 a.m. Someone had told me to go and look for the Salvation Army officers because they often had tickets for fundraising. I don't know how they got them, but I'm sure they broke the rules. I couldn't find one, so in the end I had to rely on a ticket scalper. I made it into the MCG standing room under the old Southern Stand over in that pocket over there at 10 a.m. in the morning. And when the ball was bounced 4 hours later, I was there with 113,838 other people. I have never experienced anything that came close to the noise at that first bounce, and I never have since. Of course, that might have something to do with being in the standing room area in the old Southern Stand with a noise reverberator. The last 20 years I've been up on the VIP seats in level 2 and there's not too much noise up there. Richmond won easily in the end, but the incident in the game that I remember most was Kevin Sheedy having marked near goal on a very difficult angle, pretending he was going to have a shot, only to handball over the head of the guy on the mark to Michael Green standing on his own in the goal square. I don't know why that moment with Sheed stayed in my mind. I don't know why the comment about good administration has stayed with me, or why Dick Reynolds or John Bird or Bob Shearman or the final siren image at the end of the 1968 Grand Final all had such an impact on me. But what I do know is when a headhunter called me in 1995 to suggest I consider the role of CEO of Essendon, that although it seemed an absolutely ridiculous or ludicrous proposition at that time, given my career up to then, I just had to think about it. Those moments and memories led to a decision that changed completely the direction of my career. I was never going to be any good to play this game at this level, but I was provided the opportunity to be directly involved in this great game. And that probably also explains me being unable to resist the challenge to get back into it when Andrew rang about the Melbourne Football Club, and I'm very glad he did. It may well be the pinnacle of my football career to watch this team reach ultimate success. And I'll just let all you Melbourne people know the plan was always 2020, so don't worry. Why is the game of Australian rules football such a great game? Well, why do I think it's such a great game? There are obvious reasons we all talk about. Magnificent skills under real physical and mental pressure, and with a ball that has a mind of its own and sets out to do its utmost to embarrass you. The contest, the high marks, the running and bouncing of the ball, the kicking to position, the torpedo punt, the big bumps. I mean, Sydney Stack's become an overnight cult hero. All other forms of sport at the elite level require great skills, but none at the intensity and pressure of AFL football, and not for 2 hours with minimal breaks for the players. And it's a game for all shapes and sizes. Anyone who has the skills and football smarts can make it. Just look at Sam. But there is one thing above all that I really admire about this game. The game has stayed true to itself. Yes, it has evolved, as it should, but the things we think make it great today are the same things as they've always been. Players become heroes for doing the same things their own heroes did. And the game always has the last laugh, and that's what I really love about this game. Regulators, as I'll call them, are always thinking they can make it better through rule changes, that they need to make it better to overcome the influence of coaches. When Melbourne Football Club wrote the rules back in 1859, there were 10 on one page. The current rules, at least the E version, which I read the other day, are 70 pages. Now, to be fair, 6 of those pages are made up of the contents pages and the front cover. But add to that the seemingly constant changes in interpretations of rules from week to week, sometimes on a weekly basis. I would hate to be an umpire today. At that 1968 grand final, there was one umpire, Ian Robinson. It was a tough game. Ian played 71 free kicks. 31 goals were scored. So there were at least 35 centre clearances. They probably didn't have as many stoppages as we have today, but let's say they had 40. So he bounced the ball on his own at least 75 times. I don't remember if he had a good game or not, but I do know the best team won on the day and no one talked about the umpire. Now we have 3 umpires and we're always talking about them. They only bounce the ball at the centre and sometimes not then, and some people want to get rid of that altogether. Australian rules football is unique. One aspect of its uniqueness is the umpire bouncing the ball. Please keep bouncing the ball. We now have goal reviews to avoid errors, but apparently that doesn't always work. The AFL undertook exhaustive research last year to find new rules to open up the game and increase scoring to make it more attractive. It led to the 6-6-6 rule and play on out of full back with kick-ins. But 2019 so far has been one of the lowest scoring seasons of modern times. Not that this matters necessarily, there have been some fantastic low-scoring contests as recently as last weekend out here. I hear rumours the AFL considering 4 umpires and also letting boundary umpires make decisions. The regulators continue to think that they can control this game and make it better with more rules and more umpires. Perhaps if there is a problem, and there may not be, the problem is not the umpires or the coaches, perhaps it's the 70 pages and the changing interpretations and the attempts to control it. I personally think that too many people in football and the football media take this game too seriously. At least much more seriously than the general football public does, which is why we get this constant effort to fix something that's not broken. In the end, it just opens up the AFL and umpires to criticism and ridicule. We talk too much about rules, umpires, goal reviews, and not enough about the game and the players. It's noteworthy that someone can still raise 40 years after the game about Wayne Harmes being in row 5 of the grandstand when he knocked the ball back in to allow Carlton to win that grand final. Legendary players and moments make this game great, and that was one of them. Whatever was the truth of that moment doesn't really matter. Whatever was the truth about Michael Long's goal and whether Silvani touched it doesn't matter, because it's a game. The world moved on and the game hasn't been damaged beyond repair. The game will always have the last laugh, and all I can say is thank good God for the coulda-beens. For in the AFL media world, for taking the piss out of excessive seriousness in this game. It is a truly unique game that thrives on chaos, play with a ball that has a mind of its own, and only a very few very talented people ever get close to mastering it, which is why we supporters marvel at them, because we know they have special skills we can only dream about. Or as kids, pretend in the privacy of our own backyard that we actually do have them. I do have one regret about the modern game, and that's the demise of the drop kick. I could kick a pretty good drop kick. I also have an enduring memory of Tracy Braidwood. Now that wouldn't be a household name to a lot of you. Kicking in from full back, 65-yard drop kicks at Thebarton Oval. It was a beautiful thing to watch. Bob Shearman was the best drop kick in the history of the game. Kicked the longest drop kick in history in a state game versus Victoria at Adelaide Oval, 60 yards out at least, and it went through post high. Check it out, it's much better than Malcolm Blight's torpedo. Modern players can kick the drop kick, make no mistake. They're just not allowed to. I used to watch Michael Long and Gavin Wanganeen warm up at training at Windy Hill on the wing. kicking 40-metre drop kicks to each other, hitting each other lace out, and the ball never getting above head height. Gary O'Donnell could kick a drop kick too. I dared him once to try one in a game, as he was the designated to kick in from full back. Gary, I said, when we're 10 goals in front in the last quarter, it won't matter if you stuff it up. He said he would think about it, and leading into one game we expected to win easily, but in the end he didn't do it. I said, Gary, you wimped out, what's the problem? Oh, I'm a bit scared of Kevin Sheedy. I think Kevin would have loved it. Fox Footy run a campaign, #Save the Dribble. We should start a new campaign, hashtag bring back the drop kick. See if there is a player game enough to do it. Sam, James Sicily, surely. Surely James Sicily's the type to have a crack. Can we talk about it? This game has been a big part of my life, but I must admit to being a little concerned about where it will be in the next 40 years. Not the game itself, but where it might sit in the landscape of Australian community. In a world of global digital media where kids can find their heroes in any sport, any place in the world, with 100,000 new people coming into Melbourne each year for the last decade who don't have a natural affinity with our game, and with the increasing burdens faced by community football volunteers with fundraising, compliance and finding facilities, I think the administrators who are the guardians of our game face real challenges to keep this as the preeminent game for most Australians. Australian rules football is critical to our communities, to our local communities. It has been the mortar that has held the bricks of small country communities together for a very long time. Local football clubs play really important roles in communities. They're providing a sense of belonging, mentoring to young people growing up, friendships, support in difficult times, sense of purpose, identity, camaraderie, not just for those playing, but for those volunteers who work in that club and those supporters who turn up on the boundary line and lean on the fence. It is critical the AFL supports and invests necessary funds and resources in the community football. We must get as many as we can of those 1 million people who are new to Melbourne and their future generations to love our game. I know people will say that all the current measures show AFL and Australian football to be thriving today, and they're right. But leadership also means looking over the horizon and considering the next 20, 30, 40 years from now. And AFL clubs and players need to take responsibility as well, because it comes down to where you started, what football provided for you, and the long-term viability of the game, your club, your AFL club, your junior club, and all clubs. In this regard, the decision to start AFLW was a great one. It has given women a feeling of real involvement with the game and broadened the appeal and reach of the game. The growth in participation in women's football since has been astonishing. The women who are playing the game in effect demanded the AFL make the decision. They generated the interest and attraction through their own skills and passion in the Melbourne versus Bulldogs exhibition series. The efforts of those women and that decision could be profound for the game, but only if the AFL continues to invest in the broader participation of women in AFLW. The AFLW must become a credible, serious competition to keep women believing that administrators do really care about their position in the game. As an administrator, I always believed in developing young people into this game. So if a young CEO of an AFL club just starting out on that journey asked me for some advice, this is what I will tell her. Be professional yourself. Push the idea of the club being a professional elite sporting organisation, not just a footy club. Be brave. Stand up and speak out for what you think is right, no matter the consequences for you personally. But in doing so, be empathetic for the players, as they are the real heroes, and what they endure, for the coaches and the stresses they feel, and for the members and supporters and their crazy emotional investment they have in the game and the club. You need to do all this because your club is only as good as its administration. And if one of my granddaughters comes to me and asks, Grandpa, Should I play Australian rules football? My answer will be easy, of course, because it's the best game in the world. Ladies and gentlemen, could you please charge your glasses and be upstanding? To Australian rules football. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, a big thank you to Peter Jackson. A magnificent speech. Bring back the drop kick. Absolutely. Great to hear that this year was in the Demons' plan and we can look forward to next year. We've never heard that before. And also, if anyone's looking for Peter later on, he'll be sitting next to Sam Mitchell trying to convince him not to coach his beloved Carlton. Coming up after main course, Sam will be up here to respond. Enjoy your main course.